What happens when a billionaire's pregnant wife discovers his affair through a live stream watched by 2.3 million people? Victoria Hayes Blackwood thought she knew her husband. She was wrong. While she carried his child, Marcus was stealing her money, her ideas, and her dignity. But when he abandoned their newborn daughter for a charity gala featuring his mistress, Victoria decided to crash the party. What followed was the most devastating public takedown in social media history. This is how one woman's truth brought down an empire of lies. If you love stories about justice and women who refuse to stay silent, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. You won't want to miss how this ends. Victoria Hayes Blackwood stared at her phone screen in disbelief. 2.3 million viewers were watching her husband's mistress try on her jewelry. Live. This boring little necklace screams desperate housewife. Amber Sterling giggled into the camera, holding up Victoria's grandmother's pearls. The chat exploded with laughing emojis and fire symbols. Thank God Marcus finally upgraded to someone with actual style. Victoria's 7-month pregnant belly pressed against the marble kitchen counter as she gripped her phone tighter. She had come home early from her doctor's appointment, hoping to surprise Marcus with dinner. Instead, she found Amber broadcasting from their penthouse bedroom to millions of strangers. Should I try on her wedding dress next? Amber spun around, showing off Victoria's maternity clothes hanging in the walk-in closet. I mean, she clearly doesn't need it anymore. Marcus told me she's practically given up on life. The comments rolled in faster than Victoria could read them. Queen energy. She's so much prettier than the wife. Finally ditching the dead weight. Victoria's hands trembled as she realized the horrible truth. This affair wasn't a secret. It was entertainment. Her humiliation was content for millions of viewers who saw her marriage as a soap opera. Amber held up Victoria's ultrasound photos from the dresser. Look at this. She leaves baby pictures everywhere like some kind of shrine. It's honestly pathetic how she thinks a pregnancy will save her marriage. That was the breaking point. Victoria pushed open the bedroom door. What the hell are you doing? Amber spun around, her face going pale. The phone clattered to the floor, but the live stream kept running. 2.3 million people watched as Victoria, visibly pregnant in her doctor's office clothes, confronted her husband's mistress wearing her bathrobe. Oh my God, Amber whispered. I thought you were at therapy. Therapy, Victoria's voice cracked. Is that what he told you? The chat went wild. Screenshots were already being taken. Within seconds, clips would be circulating on every social platform. Victoria's private pain was about to become public entertainment. Amber lunged for the phone, ending the stream, but the damage was done. Victoria stood in her own bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of betrayal, knowing that millions of strangers had just witnessed her lowest moment. Victoria, I can explain. Amber started. Get out. Victoria's voice was deadly quiet. Get out of my house. Get out of my clothes. Get out of my life. As Amber scrambled to gather her things, Victoria sank onto the bed she used to share with Marcus. Her phone buzzed with notifications. The video was already trending. #BlackwoodWife was climbing the charts on Twitter. She had been living in denial for months, convincing herself that Marcus was just stressed with work, that his late nights and cold shoulders were temporary, that their marriage could survive anything because they loved each other. But love couldn't survive becoming a meme. The bedroom door slammed as Amber left, but Victoria barely noticed. She was scrolling through hundreds of comments from strangers who knew about her husband's affair before she did. They had been watching her humiliation unfold in real time, treating her pain like a reality show. Her phone rang. Marcus. Tori, I can explain everything. Amber went too far today. She's young and stupid. She doesn't understand boundaries. How long? Victoria asked. What? How long have millions of people known about your affair while I've been sitting here like an idiot, planning nursery colors? The silence on the other end told her everything. Marcus had let their marriage become a public spectacle while she believed they were building a family together. 6 months earlier, Victoria had been planning her exit from the tech world. Her app development company, MomTech, was finally profitable after 3 years of 18-hour days and ramen dinners. She had created a suite of apps designed by working mothers for working mothers. Schedule coordinators, pump timers, childcare networks, simple solutions to complex problems. Marcus had been so proud when she got her first $1 million offer from a competitor. He'd taken her to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city, ordered champagne she couldn't drink because she was trying to get pregnant. "You're amazing," he'd said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But imagine what we could build together if you didn't have to split your focus." It hadn't felt like pressure then. It felt like love. Victoria had sold Momtech and used the money to invest in Marcus's ventures. She became the supportive wife, the woman behind the successful man. She told herself it was temporary. That once they had children, once Marcus's companies were more established, she'd build something new. The pregnancy had seemed like perfect timing. Marcus was launching his biggest venture yet, a portfolio of tech startups focused on innovation. He needed her support more than ever. He'd said, after the baby came, there would be time for her dreams. Now, sitting in her empty penthouse with trending hashtags mocking her marriage, Victoria realized how naive she'd been. She hadn't been building a life with Marcus. She'd been funding his empire while he planned her replacement. Her laptop sat on the kitchen counter, forgotten since she'd checked Marcus's calendar that morning. She opened it now, not to schedule his meetings or organize his life, but to understand what she was really dealing with. Marcus's email was still logged in from when she'd helped him with a presentation last week. She'd never snooped before. Trust had been the foundation of their marriage, or so she'd thought. The emails told a story she wasn't prepared for. Months of communication with Amber about brand partnerships and influencer opportunities. But buried deeper were the real revelations. Messages to his lawyers about preparing for changes in personal circumstances. Discussions with accountants about protecting assets during transition periods. Financial documents showing money being moved into accounts Victoria couldn't access. Marcus hadn't just started an affair. He'd been planning a divorce. While she was picking out baby names, he was calculating how to keep her from getting half of everything she'd helped him build. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how methodical it had been. How long he'd been planning her disposal while she made him dinner and rubbed his shoulders after long days and believed his excuses about working late. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Honey, are you okay? Someone sent me a video. Please call me." Then another from her best friend from college. "Tori, what the hell is happening? Twitter is going crazy." And another from Jake Morrison, her friend from Stanford, who'd become an investigative journalist. "Victoria, I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk. It's about Marcus." The walls were closing in. Her private humiliation was becoming public entertainment, and she had no idea how deep Marcus's deception went. But as she sat in the ruins of her perfect life, one thing became crystal clear. She wasn't going to disappear quietly. Marcus had made a mistake by underestimating her. He'd forgotten that before she became his supportive wife. She'd been a successful entrepreneur who knew how to fight for what she built. He was about to remember. Jake Morrison looked exactly the same as he had in college, just with more expensive glasses and the kind of stubble that suggested he'd been working around the clock. Victoria met him at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's gossip circuit. "I'm sorry about the video," Jake said, sliding into the booth across from her. "But honestly, it might have been the wake-up call you needed." "Everyone keeps apologizing for the wrong thing," Victoria replied, stirring her decaf coffee. "Nobody's apologizing for the fact that my husband has been planning to destroy me while I've been planning our baby's nursery." Jake pulled out a tablet and opened a folder marked Blackwood Investigation. "Victoria, I've been investigating Marcus's companies for 8 months. The story I'm working on has nothing to do with his personal life, but when I saw that live stream yesterday, I realized you might be in more danger than you know." He showed her screenshots of financial documents, incorporation papers, tax filings. To most people, it would look like boring business paperwork. But Victoria had run her own company. She recognized the patterns. "Shell companies," she whispered. "Dozens of them, all incorporated in Delaware, all designed to hide money movement. Marcus isn't just cheating on you, Victoria. He's been systematically moving assets out of anything you could claim in a divorce." Victoria felt that familiar rage building in her chest. "How much?" "Best estimate, about $40 million. Money that should be marital assets, legally speaking. but by the time any divorce proceedings start, it'll be untouchable. And Amber? Jake pulled up another set of documents. Amber Sterling isn't just his mistress. She's been on his payroll for 6 months as a brand consultant. He's been paying her $150,000 a year to pretend they're just business partners while he moves money into accounts she can access. Victoria stared at the evidence. Marcus hadn't just betrayed her emotionally. He'd been systematically stealing from her while she carried his child. There's more, Jake continued. Marcus is announcing something big next week. A charity gala called Innovation for Tomorrow. Claims it's to support working mothers in tech. That's my concept, Victoria said quietly. MomTech was supposed to be phase 1 of a nonprofit initiative to support entrepreneurial mothers. I showed him my business plan months ago. He's not just stealing your money, Victoria. He's stealing your ideas and using them to rehabilitate his public image. The gala is being positioned as his way of giving back to the community, with Amber as his co-host representing the next generation of female entrepreneurs. The audacity was breathtaking. Marcus was going to profit from her ideas while publicly humiliating her with his mistress, all under the banner of supporting women like her. I need to stop this, Victoria said. With what he's got teams of lawyers, PR specialists, and enough money to bury any legal challenge for years. You're 7 months pregnant and just became a viral meme. No offense, but you're not exactly in a position to fight. Jake was right and Victoria hated him for it, but there was something in his voice that suggested he wasn't just delivering bad news. But, she prompted, but I've been building a federal case against his companies for tax evasion and investor fraud. If I can get the right evidence, the kind that requires inside access, I might be able to expose him before the gala. What kind of access? The kind only a wife would have. Financial records, personal communications, access to his home computers. Victoria considered the proposition. Help Jake gather evidence against Marcus in exchange for exposing his crimes before he could steal her ideas and her money. If we do this, she said, I want more than just stopping the gala. I want him ruined. Jake nodded. That's the idea. But Victoria, you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't just about divorce proceedings anymore. If Marcus figures out what we're doing, he'll use every resource he has to destroy you. He'll claim you're an unfit mother, that the pregnancy has made you unstable, that you're trying to sabotage him out of jealousy. He's already doing that, Victoria replied, thinking about the live stream comments calling her desperate and pathetic. No, Jake said seriously. Yesterday was embarrassing. What I'm talking about is systematic character assassination backed by unlimited resources. Are you sure you're ready for that? Victoria placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter kick in response to her elevated heart rate. 7 months ago, she would have said no. She would have chosen peace over justice, privacy over vindication. But 7 months ago, she hadn't known what Marcus was capable of. She hadn't realized how thoroughly he'd been playing her while she built his empire with her own money and ideas. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Jake smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. Good, because Marcus just made his biggest mistake, which was, he forgot that before you became his wife, you were the woman who built MomTech from nothing, and now you're angry. The plan seemed foolproof. While Marcus was at his weekly tennis game, Victoria would access his home office computer and download the financial records Jake needed. Simple, clean, undetectable. Victoria's hands shook as she plugged Jake's flash drive into Marcus's desktop. The files started copying immediately. Bank statements, incorporation documents, communication with offshore accounts, everything Jake needed to prove the systematic fraud. 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Got everything. This is bigger than we thought. Marcus has been running a Ponzi scheme for 2 years. We can destroy him. Victoria felt a surge of triumph unlike anything she'd experienced since selling MomTech. Marcus thought he could discard her like yesterday's news. He was about to learn that she was still the woman who'd built a $1 million company from her dorm room. 3 days later, Jake called with devastating news. Victoria, we have a problem. Marcus's lawyers got a restraining order against you. They're claiming you're mentally unstable due to pregnancy hormones and that you've been threatening Marcus and his business associates. That's insane. I haven't threatened anyone. They have evidence. Screenshots of social media posts, witness statements, medical records. Victoria's blood went cold. What medical records? Your prenatal counseling sessions. Apparently, you've been struggling with depression and anxiety related to the pregnancy. Your doctor recommended therapy, which you've been refusing. I've been sad because my husband is cheating on me. That doesn't make me mentally ill. Marcus's lawyers are spinning it differently. They're saying the pregnancy has affected your judgment, that you've become paranoid and delusional. The restraining order prevents you from accessing any of his business records or contacting his associates, including you, including me, Mo. Victoria, if you violate this order, you could lose custody of your daughter. They're already building a case that you're an unfit mother. The triumph Victoria had felt 3 days ago evaporated instantly. Marcus hadn't just anticipated her move. He'd set her up for it. While she'd been gathering evidence against him, he'd been gathering evidence against her. The financial records we copied, Victoria asked desperately, can't we still use those? They were obtained illegally. Even if I could publish them, Marcus's lawyers would get an injunction. Plus, it would prove you violated the restraining order. You'd be facing criminal charges. Victoria sank into her kitchen chair, the weight of her situation crushing down on her. Marcus had outmaneuvered her completely. Every move she'd made to fight back had been turned into ammunition against her. Jake, I need those records to survive this divorce. Without proof of his financial fraud, he'll leave me with nothing. I know. But right now, we need to focus on keeping you out of jail and keeping your daughter with you. Marcus is playing chess while you're playing checkers. After Jake hung up, Victoria sat in her empty penthouse, staring at the city lights. She thought she was being smart, strategic, fighting back like the entrepreneur she used to be. Instead, she'd walked directly into Marcus's trap. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Tech billionaire Marcus Blackwood seeks help for pregnant wife's mental health struggles. The article painted a picture of a devoted husband trying to support his unstable wife through a difficult pregnancy. Anonymous sources described Victoria's erratic behavior, her paranoid accusations, her refusal to seek professional help. Mr. Blackwood is committed to ensuring both his wife and unborn child receive the care they need. His spokesperson was quoted. He asked for privacy during this difficult time. Privacy. The same man who let his mistress broadcast from their bedroom was asking for privacy while destroying Victoria's reputation in the national press. Marcus had turned her attempt at justice into proof of her instability, her fight for her rights into evidence that she was an unfit mother, her strength into weakness. Victoria realized with crystal clarity that she'd been playing by the old rules. The rules that said if you gathered enough evidence, truth would win. That justice mattered more than perception. But Marcus wasn't playing by those rules. He was playing by the rules of power, influence, and narrative control. And in that game, Victoria was losing badly. She needed to learn how to play his game better than he did. Because if she didn't, she would lose everything she'd worked for and everything she loved, including her daughter. The interview aired on a Tuesday morning. Victoria watched from her bed as Marcus sat across from America's most trusted morning show host, looking haggard and concerned. It's been incredibly difficult, Marcus said, his voice heavy with manufactured emotion. Victoria is an amazing woman, but the pregnancy has been harder on her than we anticipated. She's been having paranoid episodes, making wild accusations about my business, about my colleagues. The host nodded sympathetically. How are you supporting her through this? I've arranged for the best prenatal psychiatric care in the country, but she's been resistant to treatment. She doesn't believe she needs help, which is part of the illness. Unfortunately, Victoria's phone exploded with notifications. Her mother, her friends, former colleagues from MomTech. Everyone who'd seen Marcus paint her as a delusional pregnant woman having a breakdown. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was how believable they sounded. Victoria had been erratic lately. She had been making accusations about Marcus's business. She had been refusing therapy, mainly because she couldn't afford it after Marcus had cut off her access to their joint accounts. But Marcus's version made her sound as sane instead of betrayed. The safety of our unborn child is my primary concern, Marcus continued. Victoria's behavior has become increasingly unpredictable. Yesterday, She accused me of trying to steal her business ideas for my charity gala. She seems to believe that every successful venture I launch is somehow related to her. Victoria threw her remote at the television. Marcus was using her real concerns against her, twisting them into symptoms of mental illness. He'd taken her righteous anger and reframed it as paranoid delusion. Her phone rang. Her mother. "Honey, I just saw the interview. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling this badly?" "Mom, I'm not having a breakdown. Marcus is gaslighting me. He's been having an affair and stealing my money." "Victoria, you sound exactly like he described, paranoid and angry. Maybe you should consider the help he's offering." The conversation ended with her mother suggesting that maybe Marcus knew what was best for both Victoria and the baby. Her own mother had chosen Marcus's version of reality over hers. That afternoon, Amber Sterling posted a pregnancy photo shoot on Instagram. She was wearing Victoria's maternity clothes, posing in what looked like Victoria's nursery, with the caption, "Upgrade complete. Some women are born to be mothers, others just play one on TV." The photos went viral within hours. Comments poured in praising Amber's goddess energy and comparing her to Victoria's desperate housewife vibes. The narrative was clear that Marcus had traded up from a mentally unstable wife to a radiant, confident woman who deserved his success. Victoria's phone rang again. This time it was Rebecca Sullivan, Marcus's business partner. "Victoria, I saw the interview. I know Marcus asked me not to contact you directly, but I wanted you to know that several of us in the company are concerned about how he's handling this situation." Finally, someone who saw through Marcus's performance. "Rebecca, you know me. Do I seem mentally unstable to you?" "Not at all. Which is why I think you should know that Marcus has been talking to lawyers about getting full custody of your daughter after she's born. He's building a case that you're unfit." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "On what grounds?" "Mental illness, financial irresponsibility, paranoid behavior. He's documenting everything. Victoria, every angry text you send, every time you call him crying, every social media post about the affair. He's turning your natural responses to his betrayal into evidence that you can't care for a child. What should I do?" "Honestly, play his game. Go to therapy. Take the prenatal psychiatric evaluation. Show that you're seeking help. It'll undermine his narrative that you're refusing treatment." "But if I go to therapy, won't that prove he was right about me being unstable?" "If you don't go to therapy, he'll say you're in denial. If you do go, at least you'll have professional documentation that you're rational and responsive to support. Right now, he's controlling the entire narrative." After Rebecca hung up, Victoria stared at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. She looked exactly like what Marcus was describing. Exhausted, emotional, increasingly isolated. Her unwashed hair and tear-stained face could easily be interpreted as signs of mental illness rather than the natural response to systematic betrayal. Marcus had created a perfect trap. Every emotion she felt, every response she had, every attempt to defend herself became proof of his accusations. Her anger was instability. Her sadness was depression. Her attempts to gather evidence were paranoia. He'd turned her strength against her and made her pain into pathology. Victoria realized she had to make a choice. She could keep fighting on Marcus's terms and lose everything, including her daughter. Or she could disappear into the narrative he'd created, become the broken wife who needed saving. Neither option felt like winning. But as she touched her belly and felt her daughter respond with a strong kick, Victoria knew she couldn't afford to lose. Whatever game Marcus was playing, whatever rules he'd established, she had to find a way to beat him at it, even if it meant pretending to be the woman he claimed she was. Dr. Sarah Martinez had kind eyes and a gentle voice that made Victoria want to confess everything. But this wasn't about healing. It was about survival. "Tell me about your relationship with your husband," Dr. Martinez said during their first session. Victoria had rehearsed this moment. She needed to sound like someone seeking help, not someone gathering ammunition for a custody battle. "I love Marcus, but I've been struggling with some paranoid thoughts lately. The pregnancy has been emotionally difficult, and I think I've been seeing threats where there aren't any." "What kind of threats?" "I became convinced he was having an affair. I started going through his emails, following him, making accusations. Looking back, I can see how my behavior must have seemed erratic. It was the hardest performance of Victoria's life. Every word felt like a betrayal of her own reality. But Rebecca Sullivan had been right. If Victoria didn't control her own narrative, Marcus would control it for her. Have you discussed these concerns with Marcus? He's been incredibly patient. He arranged for me to see you. Actually, I was resistant at first, but I'm starting to realize I need help. Dr. Shani Martinez made notes on her tablet. Victoria wondered if those notes would end up in Marcus's custody filing. It's very common for pregnancy hormones to exacerbate underlying anxiety and depression. Dr. Keo Martinez explained, the important thing is that you're here now, seeking support. 3 weeks into therapy, Victoria had crafted the perfect patient persona. She was insightful about her paranoid episodes, grateful for Marcus's support, committed to managing her pregnancy-related anxiety. Meanwhile, she was quietly building her real strategy. Rebecca Sullivan became her secret ally. During their therapy sessions, Victoria would mention concerns about Marcus's business dealings, framing them as examples of her paranoid thinking. I keep worrying that Marcus is moving money around in ways that might not be legal, Victoria would tell Dr. Martinez. But I know that's just my anxiety talking. Martinez would reassure her that pregnancy often made women worry about financial security, that these concerns were normal but probably unfounded. But Rebecca Sullivan, who had access to Marcus's business records, was documenting everything Victoria paranoidly suspected. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the systematic asset hiding, all the things Victoria wasn't supposed to know about. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria would play the role of the recovering wife while secretly gathering the evidence she needed. When the time came to fight, she'd have both professional documentation of her mental stability and proof of Marcus's financial crimes. But Marcus was planning his own surprise. I have wonderful news, he announced over dinner one evening. I've moved up the date of the Innovation for Tomorrow Gala. It's next week. Victoria's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Next week, but I'm due in 3 weeks. What if I go into labor? Actually, I think it might be better if you stayed home. The stress of a big event might not be good for you right now. Victoria realized with growing horror what Marcus was planning. He was going to launch his charity gala, using her ideas, with Amber as his co-host, while she was at home in the final weeks of pregnancy. By the time their daughter was born, Marcus would be established as a philanthropic leader supporting working mothers, and Victoria would be the unstable wife who couldn't even attend his charitable endeavors. Marcus, that gala is based on my mom tech concept. I should be there. Victoria, we've talked about this. Those kinds of thoughts are exactly what Dr. Martinez said we need to watch out for. You're taking credit for things you didn't create. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Victoria almost doubted herself, but she'd learned to recognize the technique now. Marcus would take her legitimate concerns and reframe them as symptoms of illness. You're right, she said, forcing a smile. I'm sorry, I just want to be supportive of your work. I know you do. That's why I think staying home and focusing on preparing for the baby is the best way you can help right now. That night, Victoria lay in bed planning her next move. Marcus thought he'd neutralized her completely. The paranoid wife in therapy, isolated from his business, preparing to give birth while he claimed credit for her life's work. He was about to learn that the most dangerous opponent is the one who lets you think you've already won. Rebecca Sullivan had been feeding Victoria information for weeks. The gala wasn't just about stealing her ideas. It was Marcus's coming out party with Amber, designed to establish her as his legitimate partner before he filed for divorce. The guest list read like a who's who of tech investors, politicians, and media figures. Everyone who mattered would be there to witness Marcus's transformation from unfaithful husband to charitable leader. Victoria studied the floor plans Rebecca had provided. The crystal ballroom at the Meridian Hotel, 500 guests, live streaming to Marcus's social media accounts, full press coverage. It would be the perfect stage for Marcus's triumph, which made it the perfect stage for his destruction. Victoria placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks. In a week, she would crash Marcus's party, not as the broken wife seeking forgiveness, but as the woman who'd been playing a deeper game than he'd ever imagined. The performance was almost over. Soon, it would be time for the real Victoria Hayes Blackwood to take the stage. Victoria's water broke at 11:30 p.m. 6 days before the gala, she was sitting in the nursery, assembling the final pieces of her plan, when the first contraction hit. For a moment, she thought it was just another Braxton Hicks contraction. Then she felt the warm fluid and realized her daughter had decided to make her entrance early. "Marcus," Victoria called out, but there was no answer. She remembered he was at a late meeting with potential investors, probably with Amber playing the role of supportive partner. Victoria called an Uber to the hospital, texting Marcus from the back seat, "In labor, headed to Mount Sinai." His response came 20 minutes later. "Amazing, on my way. This is perfect timing." Perfect timing. Victoria wondered if Marcus realized how revealing that phrase was. Their daughter's birth was perfect timing for his narrative, not because he was excited to meet her, but because it would keep Victoria safely in the hospital during his big moment. Dr. Patricia Williams had been Victoria's obstetrician throughout the pregnancy. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd delivered thousands of babies and seen every possible family dynamic. "How are we feeling?" Dr. Williams asked as Victoria settled into the delivery room. "Honestly terrified, but not about the birth. Tell me what's on your mind." Victoria had grown to trust Dr. Williams over the past 9 months. She was one of the few people who'd never made Victoria feel crazy for her concerns about Marcus. "My husband has been having an affair and stealing money from our joint accounts. He's convinced everyone that I'm mentally unstable because of the pregnancy. I'm worried he's going to try to take custody of our daughter." Williams checked Victoria's chart. "I've been documenting your mental state throughout this pregnancy. You've been stressed, which is normal given the circumstances, but you've never shown signs of instability or delusion. If anyone questions your fitness as a mother, they'll have to contend with my professional opinion." Marcus arrived 3 hours into Victoria's labor, bringing flowers and playing the part of the devoted husband. But Victoria noticed he kept checking his phone, texting someone constantly. "How much longer do you think this will take?" he asked Dr. Williams. "I have an important meeting tomorrow. Babies come on their own schedule. Mr. Blackwood, your meeting will have to wait." But Victoria's daughter had other plans. After 8 hours of labor, Elizabeth Marie Blackwood made her dramatic entrance at 7:37 a.m., exactly 24 hours before the gala. Marcus held his daughter for exactly long enough for the mandatory photos, then started making excuses about needing to finalize preparations for the charity event. "The gala is tomorrow night," he explained to Dr. Williams. "We're raising money for programs that support working mothers. It's very important work. I'm sure it can proceed without you for a day or two," Dr. Williams replied coolly. "Actually, no. We have investors flying in from around the world. The media will be there. This event could change thousands of lives." Victoria listened to Marcus justify abandoning his wife and newborn daughter for a party based on her stolen ideas. Dr. Williams was clearly unimpressed, but Marcus didn't notice. He was already mentally at the gala, basking in praise for his charitable work. "I'll be back tomorrow morning," Marcus promised, kissing Victoria's forehead. "Get some rest. You deserve it after bringing our beautiful daughter into the world." After he left, Dr. Williams shook her head in disgust. "In 30 years of delivering babies, I've seen some selfish fathers, but that man takes the prize." Victoria looked down at Elizabeth, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her daughter was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and the strongest grip Victoria had ever felt. "He has no idea what he's walking away from," Victoria murmured. "His loss," Dr. Williams replied. "But Victoria, I need to ask, are you going to be okay financially, emotionally? Because if you're planning to leave him, now might be the time to start making arrangements." Victoria had been thinking the same thing. Marcus's abandonment of his newborn daughter for a social event would play well in custody proceedings. Dr. Williams' documentation of Victoria's mental stability would counter his claims about her fitness as a mother. But there was something else Victoria wanted more than a favorable divorce settlement. She wanted justice. "Dr. Williams, is there any medical reason I couldn't leave the hospital tomorrow evening? 24 hours after delivery. It's unusual, but not impossible if you're feeling strong and the baby is healthy." "Why?" Victoria looked down at Elizabeth again. Her daughter deserved to know that her mother was a fighter, not a victim. "Because I have a charity gala to attend." Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. The same gala your husband didn't want to miss for his daughter's birth. The very same? Victoria, are you sure about this? You've just given birth. You're physically and emotionally vulnerable. Whatever you're planning, maybe it can wait. No, Victoria said firmly. It can't wait. Marcus has been stealing from me for months while I carried his child. Tomorrow night, he's going to steal my ideas and present them as his own charitable vision. He thinks I'm safely out of the way, playing the role of the devoted new mother. And instead, Victoria smiled for the first time in months. Instead, I'm going to remind him who he's really been underestimating. Jake Morrison arrived that evening with a laptop, a portable printer, and the most comprehensive financial analysis Victoria had ever seen. Rebecca Sullivan came through, he explained, setting up his equipment in Victoria's hospital room. She's been copying everything for weeks. Marcus's shell companies, the offshore accounts, the systematic fraud, but more importantly, she found the smoking gun, which is Marcus has been using charity donations to fund his personal expenses, the Innovation for Tomorrow Foundation. It's a front. 60% of donations go directly into accounts he controls. Victoria felt a surge of energy that had nothing to do with postpartum adrenaline. That's federal fraud. Multiple counts, but here's the beautiful part. Tomorrow night's gala is being live-streamed to his social media accounts. If we expose this during the event, while he's actively soliciting donations, it becomes conspiracy to commit fraud in real time. Victoria looked at her sleeping daughter. Elizabeth would grow up knowing her mother had been strong enough to fight for what was right. Jake, are you ready to bring down a billionaire? The question is, are you ready? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Marcus will use every resource he has to destroy you. Victoria thought about the past few months, the gaslighting, the financial abuse, the systematic campaign to make her doubt her own reality. Marcus had already tried to destroy her. He's been trying to destroy me for months, she said. Tomorrow night, I destroy him back. Victoria's reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror surprised her. 24 hours after giving birth, she looked stronger than she had in months. Not the exhausted, desperate woman from the live stream disaster, but someone with purpose. Jake had brought her a simple black dress that accommodated her postpartum body and comfortable shoes that wouldn't draw attention. The plan required stealth, not glamour. Are you sure about this? Dr. Williams asked as she completed Victoria's discharge paperwork. You should be home bonding with your daughter, not confronting your husband at some social event. My daughter is coming with me, Victoria said, settling Elizabeth into her car seat. She should see what it looks like when someone fights for their family. The Meridian Hotel was exactly as impressive as Victoria had expected. Red carpets, photographers, guests in designer gowns worth more than most people's cars. Marcus's world, where appearance mattered more than substance. Victoria entered through the service entrance Jake had arranged, avoiding the media circus at the main doors. The hotel staff had been told she was a surprise guest speaker, arriving late due to a family emergency. Through the ballroom doors, Victoria could see Marcus on stage, looking more confident than she'd ever seen him. He wore his success like expensive cologne, obvious and overwhelming. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus was saying into the microphone, Innovation for Tomorrow represents everything I believe about the power of technology to transform lives. Specifically, the lives of working mothers who deserve our support. The irony was breathtaking. Marcus was using Victoria's exact words from her MomTech pitch, delivered to an audience who would never know they came from the woman he'd betrayed. Amber stood beside him, radiant in a red dress that cost more than Victoria's monthly grocery budget. She looked like she belonged there, like she'd been born to stand in spotlights and receive applause. My partner Amber Sterling and I have worked tirelessly to create programs that will support this next generation of female entrepreneurs. Marcus continued, Partner, he was introducing his mistress as his business partner to 500 of the most influential people in tech. Victoria felt her postpartum hormones surge with rage that had nothing to do with childbirth. Jake positioned himself near the tech booth controlling the live stream. The event was being broadcast to Marcus's 3 million social media followers, with viewers commenting in real time. The comments are brutal, Jake whispered into his earpiece. Everyone's asking where his wife is. Someone posted the hospital bracelet photo you're still wearing. Victoria looked down at the plastic band around her wrist. Blackwood, Victoria, Diab, date, allergies none. She'd forgotten to remove it after discharge. But seeing it now, Victoria realized it was perfect. Undeniable proof of where she'd been 24 hours ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus continued, I'd like to share the inspiration behind innovation for tomorrow. Too often, brilliant women sacrifice their dreams to support their families. They put their careers aside, their ambitions on hold, because they believe love requires that level of sacrifice. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. He was talking about her, using her sacrifice as inspiration for his charity fraud while she stood 10 feet away, holding the daughter he'd abandoned. But imagine a world where women didn't have to choose, where they could build families and build companies, where their ideas weren't seen as secondary to their roles as wives and mothers. The applause was thunderous. Marcus was getting a standing ovation for advocating the exact opposite of what he'd done to Victoria. That's our cue, Jake whispered. Victoria took a deep breath, adjusted Elizabeth in her arms, and walked through the ballroom doors. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Photographers swiveled their cameras. The live stream chat exploded with comments. Oh my God, is that his wife? She just had a baby. This is about to get messy. Victoria walked slowly down the center aisle, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She didn't run, didn't shout, didn't create the dramatic scene Marcus could dismiss as hysteria. She simply existed, undeniably present in the space he'd tried to erase her from. Marcus's confident smile faltered when he saw her. His hand gripped the microphone tighter, knuckles white against the black metal. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice suddenly strained. My wife Victoria is here. She's just given birth to our beautiful daughter. Scattered applause, but the energy in the room had shifted completely. This was no longer Marcus's triumph. It was something else entirely. Victoria reached the front of the ballroom and stopped. She didn't approach the stage, didn't demand the microphone. She simply stood there, a new mother holding her day-old daughter, while her husband praised the value of supporting working mothers. Victoria, darling, Marcus said, his tone suggesting she was an unexpected but welcome surprise. Would you like to say something? After all, you understand better than anyone the challenges working mothers face. It was a perfect setup. Marcus was giving her the microphone, confident that she would either decline graciously or say something that confirmed his narrative about her instability. He had no idea that Victoria had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Thank you, Marcus, Victoria said, accepting the microphone from a shocked sound technician. I do understand the challenges working mothers face. She looked out at the audience. 500 of the most powerful people in tech, all watching her with rapt attention. Beyond them, she knew millions were watching the live stream, especially when someone steals their ideas. The ballroom fell into complete silence. Victoria could hear the soft whir of cameras and the distant sound of traffic outside. Elizabeth stirred in her arms but didn't wake. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria continued, her voice steady and clear. My name is Victoria Hayes Blackwood, and I'm the founder of MomTech, a company dedicated to supporting working mothers through technology. She looked directly at Marcus, whose face had gone pale. Amber stood frozen beside him, her confident smile cracking. 3 years ago, I developed a comprehensive business plan for supporting entrepreneurial mothers. The plan included apps for scheduling and coordination, funding networks for women-owned businesses, and mentorship programs connecting established female executives with emerging entrepreneurs. Victoria paused, letting the audience absorb the information. The live stream comments were going crazy. I sold my company to invest in my husband's ventures. I gave him my business plan, my ideas, my money, and my support. I believe we were building something together. Marcus grabbed for the microphone, but Victoria stepped back smoothly. Tonight, Marcus is presenting my business plan and his own charitable vision. The Innovation for Tomorrow Foundation is based entirely on concepts I developed for MomTech. The murmurs in the audience were getting louder. Victoria could see investors exchanging concerned looks. Reporters were frantically typing on their phones. But that's not the worst part, Victoria continued. The worst part is that Marcus has been systematically stealing from the very people he claims to want to help. Jake had positioned himself near the main screens around the ballroom. On cue, the displays that had been showing promotional videos for Innovation for Tomorrow switched to financial documents. Bank statements appeared on every screen in the room, transfers from charity accounts to personal accounts, shell companies designed to hide money movement, offshore accounts containing millions of dollars in donated funds. These documents show that Marcus has been diverting 60% of charitable donations to personal accounts, Victoria announced as the evidence scrolled across the screens. Money donated to help working mothers has been funding private jets, luxury vacations, and gifts for his mistress. The room erupted. Investors were shouting questions. Board members were demanding explanations. Photographers were clicking frantically. Marcus lunged for the microphone again. "This is exactly what I've been trying to protect her from," he shouted into the sound system. "Victoria has been having paranoid delusions since her pregnancy began. She's obsessed with the idea that I'm somehow stealing from her." But the evidence was undeniable. The financial documents were displayed on screens throughout the room, broadcast to millions of viewers on social media. Marcus's denials sounded desperate against the weight of documented proof. "Victoria has been in psychiatric treatment," Marcus continued, his voice breaking. "She's not well. These accusations are symptoms of her illness." Victoria had anticipated this response. She pulled a folder from the diaper bag Jake had prepared. "Actually, Marcus, I have documentation from Dr. Sarah Martinez, my therapist, and Dr. Patricia Williams, my obstetrician, both confirming that I am mentally stable and competent." Victoria held up the letters. "Dr. Martinez specifically notes that my concerns about financial irregularities in your business have proven to be well-founded, not delusional." The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't just a business scandal anymore. It was a public dismantling of a man who had tried to gaslight his wife while stealing from charity. Amber finally found her voice. "This is insane," she said, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Marcus, tell them she's lying." "Actually," Victoria said, turning to address Amber directly, "you're not innocent in this either." More documents appeared on the screens. Payment records showing Amber receiving $150,000 annually as a brand consultant while having no apparent qualifications beyond being Marcus's mistress. Amber Sterling has been receiving substantial payments from Marcus's companies for services never rendered, Victoria announced. She's essentially been paid to be his mistress while he moved marital assets into accounts she could access. Amber's face went white. The confident influencer who had mocked Victoria on livestream was crumbling under the weight of public exposure. "The most disgusting part," Victoria continued, looking back at Marcus, "is that you abandoned our newborn daughter to be here tonight. You left the hospital this morning, 24 hours after Elizabeth was born, because this gala was more important to you than your child." She held up her hospital bracelet, still attached to her wrist. "I gave birth yesterday morning. I should be home bonding with my daughter. Instead, I'm here because someone needs to speak for all the working mothers you've been stealing from." The applause started slowly, just a few people, then built into a thunderous ovation. The audience was on its feet, not for Marcus's charitable vision, but for Victoria's courage in exposing his crimes. Marcus made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "You're destroying our family," he shouted over the applause. "Think about our daughter." Victoria looked down at Elizabeth, who had slept peacefully through the entire confrontation. "I'm thinking about our daughter," Victoria replied. "I'm thinking about the world I want her to grow up in. A world where women's ideas are not stolen by men who claim to support them. A world where someone's word means something." She handed the microphone back to the stunned sound technician. "The FBI is already investigating Marcus's companies based on this evidence," Victoria announced. "I encourage anyone who donated to Innovation for Tomorrow to contact federal authorities about recovering your money." As Victoria walked toward the exit, Elizabeth still sleeping in her arms, the ballroom erupted in chaos. Investors were demanding answers. Board members were calling emergency meetings. Reporters were broadcasting live updates. Marcus stood alone on the stage, his empire collapsing in real time, broadcast to millions of people who had just watched his wife destroy him with nothing but the truth. 3 months later, Victoria sat in her new office overlooking Central Park, Elizabeth sleeping in a bassinet beside her desk. The space was smaller than Marcus's executive suite, but it was hers. MomTech 2.0 had launched with funding from investors who'd witnessed Marcus's downfall at the gala. The video of Victoria's expose had been viewed over 50 million times, spawning 1,000 think pieces about corporate fraud, gaslighting, and the power of women who refused to stay silent. Marcus was facing federal charges for charity fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. His companies had collapsed within weeks of the gala. Amber Sterling had disappeared from social media entirely after losing all her sponsorship deals. Jake Morrison's article about the case had won a Pulitzer Prize nomination and established him as one of the country's leading investigative journalists. But the most satisfying outcome wasn't Marcus's downfall or the success of her new company. It was the custody arrangement that gave Victoria primary custody of Elizabeth, with Marcus receiving supervised visitation twice a week. The judge had been particularly influenced by Dr. Williams's testimony about Marcus abandoning his newborn daughter for a social event, and Dr. Martinez's documentation that Victoria's concerns about her husband's behavior had been legitimate, not delusional. Victoria's phone rang. It was Rebecca Sullivan. "Victoria, I have news. The federal prosecutors just offered Marcus a plea deal, 20 years if he admits guilt and helps recover the stolen charity funds. Is he going to take it? His lawyers are recommending it. The alternative is probably life in prison." Victoria looked down at Elizabeth, who was beginning to stir. In a few minutes, she'd need to be fed and changed and comforted. Simple. Human needs that mattered more than any business deal or social event. "Good," Victoria said. "Maybe he'll have time to think about what he threw away." After Rebecca hung up, Victoria reflected on the past year. She'd lost a marriage, but gained self-respect. She'd lost financial security, but built something more valuable. She'd lost the comfortable lie of her perfect life, but found the uncomfortable truth of her own strength. Elizabeth opened her eyes and looked directly at her mother, as if she understood everything that had happened to bring them to this moment. "You want to know something, baby girl?" Victoria whispered. "Mommy used to think that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could be bigger. But that's not love. That's just fear." Victoria stood up and walked to the window, holding Elizabeth so she could see the city spreading out below them. "Real love makes everyone bigger. Real love doesn't require anyone to disappear." Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison. "Saw the Times article about MomTech 2.0. Congratulations on the Series A funding. Want to celebrate with coffee sometime?" Victoria smiled. Maybe she was ready for coffee. Maybe she was ready for a lot of things she'd thought were impossible when she was married to Marcus. But first, she had a daughter to raise and a company to build and a life to live on her own terms. Victoria Hayes Blackwood had learned the most important lesson of her life in the months since the gala. She didn't need anyone's permission to be powerful. She just needed to stop pretending she wasn't. As she settled back into her chair to feed Elizabeth, Victoria's computer chimed with a new email. The subject line read, "Thank you from a working mother in Detroit." "Dear Victoria," the email began, "I watched your gala speech 50 times. My husband has been telling me I'm crazy for thinking he's been stealing from our joint business account. After seeing your story, I hired a lawyer and found out I was right. You saved my family's future. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the person calling you crazy is the one who needs you to stay quiet." Victoria had received hundreds of similar emails over the past 3 months. Women who'd been gaslit, manipulated, and made to doubt their own perceptions. Women who'd seen Victoria's story and realized they weren't alone. She'd thought she was just exposing Marcus's crimes. Instead, she'd started a movement. MomTech 2.0 wasn't just a company anymore. It was a platform for women to support each other, to share resources, to refuse to be silenced. Every app they developed, every program they funded, every story they shared was a reminder that women's voices mattered. Elizabeth finished eating and fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder. Through the office window, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Victoria thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, the supportive wife who'd given up her dreams for someone else's ambition, the pregnant woman who'd discovered her husband's betrayal through a viral video, the new mother who'd been told she was too unstable to fight back. That woman had been brave, but she'd been fighting for the wrong things. She'd been trying to save a marriage that was already over, to fix a man who didn't want to be fixed, to make herself small enough to fit into someone else's vision of her life. This woman was fighting for something better, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been told she was asking for too much, expecting too much, or imagining too much. Victoria adjusted Elizabeth in her arms and returned to her computer. She had investor calls to make, products to develop, and a future to build. But first, she had one more email to write. "Dear Marcus," she typed, then paused. Actually, Victoria realized she had nothing left to say to him. Marcus had taught her everything she needed to know about the difference between love and control, between support and manipulation, between partnership and exploitation. She deleted the draft and opened a new document instead. Momtech Manifesto, she typed at the top of the page. We believe that women's ambitions are not secondary to their relationships. We believe that supporting someone you love doesn't require sacrificing your own dreams. We believe that the most dangerous person is someone who has been underestimated. Victoria smiled as Elizabeth shifted in her sleep. Her daughter would grow up in a world where women didn't have to choose between love and ambition, between family and career, between being kind and being strong. Elizabeth would know that she could be all of these things at once, because her mother had refused to be anything less. The city lights were beginning to twinkle outside Victoria's window as she continued typing her manifesto, building the foundation for a company that would change thousands of lives. But the most important life it had already changed was her own. Victoria Hayes Blackwood was no longer the billionaire's pregnant wife. She was the woman who'd crashed his Gala and built an empire from the wreckage of his lies. And this was just the beginning.